Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at creating an organization chart programmatically. Today we're going to be looking at organization charts. I have looked at how organization charts can be easily generated using a PowerBasic application. There are a number of facilities that can be found on the internet that allow generation of organization charts, not least of which is the one from Google. However, each of the ones I found had some issue or other, sometimes in the number of items that could be displayed on the organization chart, or just the ease of use. So what we're going to look at today is an organization chart that is created within an HTML document and makes use of 2 or 3 tags within HTML to format a document that will display our organization chart in a nice, easy to understand format. So let's first start with the data. In any organization chart, you need to have a list of staff, and you need to specify the relationship between the staff so you know which member of staff reports to which other member of staff. On screen we have a simple notepad document containing a single name, in this case Jonathan Russo. This is going to be the top of our hierarchy, the chief executive or the owner of our fictitious company. All the names used within this application have been randomly generated using routines we've used before in previous videos to generate both first name and surnames. So let's consider a very simple hierarchy first of all. There are going to be 3 people in the organization: the chief executive, which we already have on screen, and 2 other members of staff. The data in our document is going to be constructed of several elements. We have Jonathan Russo as the chief executive, and underneath that we have another member of staff called Tyler Jordan. The data on that line has 2 elements: the member of staff in the rightmost element and their manager on the left-hand side. When we get down to 3 levels of staff, there will be 3 elements on each line. And when we get down to the lower levels, there will be 4, 5 and possibly even 6. Keeping the data this way makes it really easy to actually generate a hierarchy. So let's have a look at the code to see how we can generate our organization chart from just this simple data. As we're going to be generating an HTML document, we're going to be using some HTML tags. So at the very least, we would have a header and a footer in this HTML document. So we're going to create those as constants. So we now have 2 string constants. The first being the header, specifying the opening tag for HTML, and the second being the footer, being our closing tag. I'll add an additional constant which can be used for a company name. We're going to want to output all this data in the HTML document to a file. So we'll create a constant for the name of that file. So having completed that, we can now go ahead to start to populate the code within our PB main function. As we're going to generate this organization chart, this org chart, we'll want to create a function whose job it is to generate that chart. So we'll call that function generateOrgChart. The first parameter is the path and the name of the file containing all our staff names. The second parameter is the path and the name of the output file, the HTML document we want to prepare. So we will create the skeleton for a new generateOrgChart function taking the 2 parameters. The first task of this function will be attempt to try and wipe our output file should it already exist. This way we will continually reuse the output file. We can do this with a simple try-catch block. At the beginning of our try block, we attempt to kill or delete the output file. Should the file not exist, the catch statement will allow us to continue normally. It will not error the program. As we're going to spend a lot of our time adding to this HTML document, I'm going to create a very simple function to add to the HTML file. This function will call add2HTML and it will take a single parameter. That is the HTML string to write to the document. We'll create that function in a moment, so we've now made 2 calls to this new function, one to add the header and one to add the footer. and a final message to our log to say building the tree has now completed. So let's create this small function. This function takes a single parameter, the HTML string we wish to add to the HTML file, and it's calling a single function within our PB file handling routines library. This is to append this piece of data to the end of the file specified, in this case the HTML output file. So if we compile this now, it compiles quite cleanly, and if we run our application, it will run and it will have now created our HTML file. And there is our new org chart file. If we double click on that, we'll see that it displays a very straightforward HTML file with the GSF software hierarchy message at the top of the screen. So now that we've got the header and the footer in place, we now have to put the content of the file. So between the header and the footer, we need the code to build the tree itself. And we're going to embed that in another new function. We'll call that build tree, and we'll pass it the parameter of the file name. This is a file that contains our staff data. So the staff data we have at the moment has 3 records in it, the 3 members of staff. We want to read this file into an array. So we will dimension the array that we're going to populate. This will be a simple one-dimensional string array. And we're going to use another of the functions in our file library called read the file into an array. This will save us doing a great deal of coding. It takes only 2 parameters, the name of the file and the name of the array. So assuming this function returns true, it will mean that our file has been successfully loaded into our array. So now that we've successfully loaded the file into the array, we can do a for next loop to step through each record in our array. So we will create a new local variable to allow us to step through each record. So we're starting our for next loop from 0 to the upper bounding of the array. The 0 line will contain the chief exec, the manager over the entire organization. So we're going to treat this slightly differently from all the other lines in the data. So we're going to use a select case statement to determine which line we're actually processing. So if we're dealing on the first data row, row 0, then we'll be dealing with the chief exec. And we're going to be picking up the name of the person using the parse command. The data in the file only has 1 element within it at the moment, and we're parsing it on the / character. So the parse command here is using the -1 option, which means we read the string from the right hand side. So we're basically taking the last element of that string parsed on the / character. This will give us the name of the member of staff. And we're then calling the add to HTML function to add this HTML to that file. We're using 2 tags here, the li tag and the span tag. The li is the list tag. The use of the span tag will become more obvious later once we start drawing the tree. But this at the moment is putting out the text CEO, a dash, and then the staff name. For every other data line in the file, we're doing much the same thing. We're reading in the staff name being the rightmost element in our data record. If the staff name turns out to be blank, then we've reached a blank record and we want to skip over it. We could do that using the iterate command. The next section of code is essential to the drawing of our tree. We want to count the number of elements in the current row. This would be this row here. Now we can see on screen there are currently 2 elements, separated by the / character. And we want to determine the number of elements in the previous row, in this case only 1. If the number of elements in the current row is greater than the number of elements in the first row, then we are going down the tree and we have discovered someone who is the subordinate of a manager. So we're going to use 2 parse counts command to count the number of elements on each of these rows. And we're going to create those local variables to allow us to store that. Having determined the number of elements on the current row and the previous row, we can now make a decision based on that information. So we're going to use another select case statement to test the value of the current elements minus the previous elements. If the element count is going up, then we are starting a new unordered list. So we can use the UL tag to say we are beginning a new unordered list. And if the value is less than 0, then we know the count is going down. Therefore, we can close off the previously created unordered list and close off the li command, the list. This will become more obvious when you see the tree control, which you will see shortly. Having closed off or created the next element, we can now use an add to HTML command to put the name of this new person in on the record. And once we get to the very end of the for next loop, we can then close off the current list and the unordered list. So that completes the coding of the build tree function. As you can see, there's not a great deal of code here. So let's do a test compile. It compiles quite cleanly. And if we try running our application, it completes. So let's now have a look at the organization chart. If we double click on the HTML file, we now have a hierarchy showing on screen. Now at the moment it's showing as a basic tree control. It's showing as our chief exec, Jonathan Russell, with 2 members of staff underneath them. Now this does look like a tree control, but it doesn't look like an organization chart. What we will do now though, to improve the look of this tree control and turn it into an organizational chart, is to use a cascading style sheet. And here is our style sheet. If we open our style sheet up, you will see it's not a particularly big document. This specifies how we can actually turn our tree diagram into an organizational chart. Within here are defined the colors we're going to be using in our organization chart. So now that we have a style sheet, we'll need to change our header in the HTML to say that it has a style sheet. So if we go back to look at our code again, and we're going to slot in a new line of code. There is the reference to our style sheet. We're using the link tag, we're specifying it's a style sheet, and our style sheet name is style.css. So we'll just save that and run our application once more. This will have created a new version of the HTML file. So if we double click on the org chart now, we will see what it has displayed on screen looks a lot more like a standard organization chart. However, we only have 3 members of staff in our organization. Can we now add more staff to the list? So let's add more staff reporting to Tyler Jordan. So we've added now another 4 staff. 1 member of staff immediately underneath Tyler, who is called Summer Marshall, and Summer Marshall has 2 staff that report to them, and an additional member of staff, Hamish Luna, who reports direct to Tyler. So let's save that. We will rerun our executable, there's no need to recompile it, and a new file has been generated. So let's look at the org chart. And there is a new organization chart, correctly showing Tyler Jordan having 2 members of staff directly reporting to them, Summer Marshall and Hamish Luna. And Summer Marshall has 2 members of staff in their team, showing quite correctly. So it's handling currently 4 levels of staff. Let's put some more staff in. So we've now added some more levels of staff. Let's save that. And we'll run our code again. And we will just refresh our page. And there our HTML has now dynamically taken on the new structure. As we can now see, Hamish Luna now has staff reporting to them. So far our code is handling quite nicely the organization chart we have given it. If we add another member of staff reporting to Tyler, save that, and run the application once more, and then refresh our chart. And there is another member of staff popping up. So if we add even more staff to the list, and save that, run our application again, reload our chart, And there we have now a larger organisation chart. So what we've achieved today is, with a little use of some HTML tags, we can create quite a respectable looking organisation chart. And our PowerBasic application runs through the data file quite quickly to produce a chart that is usable. As with any system, there are limitations. You're limited mostly on the size of your screen. With a very large organisation chart with many hundreds of staff, then it will grow bigger than the size of your biggest screen. So you may want to limit your charts to something the users can actually read. If we compress down the size of the chart, you will see that the HTML does fold the person's name to allow the chart still to be viewable. And once it gets below a certain size, you will then automatically get a scroll bar. The only caveat is that our data needs to be in a particular format, with the hierarchy shown on every record, leading right back to the head of the company. However, sorting the file alphabetically will allow it to get into the format you actually need. Hopefully you'll find this code useful in your applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.